Hi, Julian. Is it Julian or Julian?
Hello. Hi.
Do I say Julian or Julian?
Julian. Julian's fine.
Julian. All right, good. Hello, everyone. It's 1:34, but I see that there are still people who are not assigned yet. So we will wait one more minute and we will start at 1:35. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third concurrent session of the conference today. Welcome to the presentation titled Black Males, a Lifelong Journey and Implications for K-12 Teachers. My name is Jun Hyun. I am an associate professor and chair of the school counseling program at Sierra Pacific University. I am honored to introduce our esteemed presenters here today. So let me welcome them first. So our first presenter, Julian Lloyd Coatling Williams, is a first-year doctoral student at Sierra Pacific University studying industrial organizational psychology. His primary focus of research centers around diversity, equity, and inclusion. He works as a diversity partner, graduate assistant for the program. He has done previous work with selection and team management before attending SPU. Our second presenter is Geoff Evans. Geoff Evans is a former senior executive from the Boeing company who retired in 2018 after 38 years in the aerospace and aviation industry. He spent much of his career focused on developing valuable solutions for customers desperately in need of positive change in their business operations. From 2014 to 2017, Geoff also served as president and CEO of San Diego-based Boeing subsidiary Tapestry Solutions, where he led the turnaround of the struggling software company and returned it to profitably during his 3-year tenure. Throughout the course of his career, Geoff has managed through myriad of challenges, learned a variety of leadership lessons, garnered valuable insights from trusted mentors, and had a wide range of insightful experiences that contributed to him having a long and accomplished career. Those lessons learned and varied experiences were known as leadership development, and each one shaped him into the productive executive that he has become. Upon reflection, his career, once he retired and in the wake of mounting challenges that have long faced Black men, both in business and society, Geoff realized that there is a desperate need for positive changes in American society as it relates to positive Black male development. He has turned his attention to developing a means by which valuable knowledge can be transferred from accomplished Black men to future Black men, just as leadership lessons were transferred to him to aid in his development throughout his career. Following the horrible killing of George Floyd, like many others around the world, Geoff was compelled to take action. So soliciting the help of his longtime friend and former Boeing colleague, Dr. Paul Yost, he is focused on creating a knowledge transfer platform that will facilitate the sharing of valuable life lessons and experiences between accomplished Black men and developing Black boys. This effort is called the Black Male Experience Network, BMEN. BMEN, is it BMEN? Do you call it BMEN? And its goal is to create a mechanism that allows Black boys to understand and benefit from the experiences of those who have gone before them. A key objective of the BMEN effort is to establish the world's largest database of positive Black male experiences and life lessons, and then enable Black boys to actually engage in some of those same types of experiences and to learn many of those life lessons. The BMEN initiative seeks to change that paradigm and to become an always accessible resource in the lives of developing young Black males. Geoff has chosen the establishment and growth of BMEN as his post-retirement life's work. Our third presenter is Dr. Paul Yost. Is the chair of the Industrial Organizational Psychology at Seattle Pacific University. His teaching and research focuses on lifelong leader development, organizational change, and resilience. Before coming to SPU, he worked at Boeing and Microsoft, focusing on leadership and employee development. Please welcome these esteemed presenters here today for the third concurrent session.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Alrighty. Well, once again, my name is Julian, and I am a first-year doctoral student in the Industrial Organizational Psychology program at Seattle Pacific University. And firstly, I want to thank everyone for their attendance to our session, also the School of Education for welcoming us into this space. As Dr. Hyun has mentioned, during this session, we plan on discussing the key formative experiences that we've identified through interviews and research that have assisted us in the development and seeing the development of people who identify as Black males. We also will be discussing the lessons that were derived from these experiences, the support systems that were provided to them in their development, and the coping strategies that have been critical in their development. Our hope is that with this research, we can it can be used to benefit Black youth on their way up through their career, and also provide insight to better support the overall community. With the content of the session in mind, I really want to lean in on our K through 12 educators as their experience and with their experiences in the field. I think we would want this conversation, we would want this presentation to be more of a conversation so that we can take the material that you provide to us and also we can take the material from this presentation and also we can also have it incorporated within our work moving forward. So please utilize the chat if you have any questions about the material, and we'll address them throughout the presentation. And we also have designated sections for discussion throughout the session. Your voice really matters with this presentation and this process, so I will be taking notes. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton over to Jeff, so he can give us an even deeper dive into our purpose and the framing around what we've been doing over the past few months. So here we go.
Great, thank you very much, Julian. Just in the way of just a bit of context, as our facilitator mentioned, this has been a challenging period, certainly for me personally as a Black male, but in general, I have grown very weary, candidly, of the recurring theme that has unfortunately made its way into our society. I'm a product of two educators, a dad who was a principal and a mom who was a teacher for 40 plus years, and grew up in the South, and witnessed a father who for the first 15 years of his career was not allowed by law to earn any more than 67% of the salary of the least qualified white male in his county. And I am a product of a family, first kid to go to an integrated school. And, candidly, I had a lot of different existence than my father did at the same time in his life. I feel as though I survived it, was able to navigate it and to thrive to some degree. And the reality is that that's not every Black male's journey. I got to this point in my life by the grace of God and with some guidance along the way that served me well as I try to navigate through life. But when I think about the tragedies that we've all we've seen, I think about my experiences, the lessons that I learned. There are a lot of accomplished Black males in this world. They don't get publicized. You don't hear a lot about them on CNN or things of that sort. You hear all the negative. And so what started to bubble up in me as I angered post the George Floyd killing was, do I take that action, that anger, and turn it into action that is negative? Or do I try to ask myself, what can I do to contribute to not ever having to see that kind of a situation again? And so, as was mentioned in the intro, reaching out to Dr. Yost, who I've had a long relationship with, my goal is to try to figure out how to capture the positive lessons that have been learned, the positive experiences that Black males have had to produce accomplished Black men in society, and to make those available to those who will follow us. There is no real knowledge platform that enables the transfer of these kinds of experiences. And as a result of that, I felt motivated. I am motivated to try to create that platform and help those who will follow. So really the purpose of our work is just that, developing this mechanism that positive life experiences can be understood, explained, and experienced by young Black males, so that as they're in their formative years, they are seeing some of the examples of that which is proven to be successful, if you will, however you define that, and can get access to people who've navigated life reasonably well around some of the traps that so many young Black men are portrayed as falling into. So that's the real purpose of what we're trying to do. And then creating tools for groups like yourselves who are engaging with these young Black males at this point in their lives. You are as I like to say, the last mile, the tip of the spear, if you will. You are the folks who are seeing these young people in their day-to-day environments, their day-to-day existence, and they don't always understand how to communicate with their teachers about the kinds of things that they're missing or they don't understand. And so the thought here is to create tools for the world, but certainly for educators, to be able to tap into experiences that maybe they themselves haven't had, but those who have navigated the paths that these young Black men or males will be navigating in the future, they have had those experiences, and to make them available to them, and ultimately to make connections where connections can be made, to facilitate mentorship, not something that some young man wants to do something but doesn't know anybody in his community that knows anything about that. So therefore, there's no way that I can connect. So that's really what this is all about. And for this session, we want to engage with you in ways that can help us to better understand how best to reach these communities. We'll explain the process that we've undergone so far. And I want to emphasize, we're in the early stages of this. The goal is to expand this broadly, because that's not to say that we've captured all of the experiences and lessons to be learned, for sure. But with the survey that we're putting together, We're going to expand this broadly to try to get perspective from a much larger pool of Black males, so as to ensure that the experience and lessons learned database, if you will, is enriched and enhanced, and therefore that much more useful to the target audience. So it's really about imparting knowledge and enabling young Black men, helping them want you all to help us to create the messages and tools because of your proximity to them on an ongoing basis in the classroom and in the communities. And like your thoughts on how to implement some of the ideas that we come up with, unique delivery systems, beyond the classrooms, communities, nonprofits. I mean, we don't pretend to know all the ways that this information can get imparted to the community that we're trying to reach, but your perspective is certainly going to be helpful. Next slide, please, Julian. So where are we going? I mean, I've kind of outlined the challenge. We have begun to capture key experiences from folks who have gotten, I keep saying, to the other side. I mean, I think there are kind of three phases of certainly a young Black man's existence. There is survive, there is navigate, and then if you get through those, thrive, do well. So many young Black males are in the survive mode, and not all are actually surviving successfully. So we're hoping that some of these experiences and lessons that have been learned and the lessons that will be added to what we're doing will be able to be of help to them. I want to illuminate support systems because we've all had them. If you're sitting on this call today, you've gotten to a point in life by means other than just your own efforts. There have been support systems around you. And again, not everybody has access to those same support systems, not even aware of them in some cases. So support systems that have proven to be beneficial, strategies that have been implemented that have helped this process of getting to manhood and thriving in manhood. Those are all important to capture. And most importantly for this session, the implications of what we're trying to do for the audience that you're most in touch with, these young Black males that are in the formative years. Next slide, please. We all kind of know the challenge, and we know that there have been a lot of negative narratives out there for many, many years. Positive knowledge sharing methods are really not institutionalized, I'll say, in Black communities. You know someone who did well, or too often you hear about some athlete that has made it out and that kind of thing, but what efforts were put into the accomplishments that those who have become accomplished? Do you understand that? Is that available and accessible to the young boys and men that are developing the community? Oftentimes not. It becomes folklore, or it becomes rumor, or things of that sort, and certainly not anything that could be accessed. So again, something we really want to try to address. 40% of the US population, prison population, is Black. And while Blacks represent such a much smaller percentage of the population, we know these stories and we know how it's been projected. But the reality is that there is a positive narrative as well. The progress that has been made since my dad was in his 20s has been dramatic. When you see poverty having fallen from 41% to 18% today, the middle class for Black men expanding, that didn't happen because they were just lucky. There were strategies put in place. There were practices executed. There were lessons learned. The challenge is capturing those and making them available to those that will be coming behind this generation. Next, please. This quote, Dr. Yost actually provided me with this quote, and this kind of underscores what we intuitively know. In spite of all the negative narrative, the reality is that most young Black males are not incarcerated. Most do not commit crimes. Most of them do not terrorize their communities. Most are caring, loving, and thoughtful sons, brothers, cousins, nephews, uncles, and in some cases, fathers. That's the reality. That is the reality. That's not what gets publicized, but that is the reality. And to become those caring, loving, thoughtful sons, fathers, brothers, and cousins, they had to utilize strategies and navigate it around challenges and learn lessons. That is what we're trying to capture, make available, make it institutionalized, make it transferable so that more and more of the young generation of Black males that is coming along can in fact both access and learn how to utilize those same lessons learned and experiences and strategies so that they too can add to the ranks of the caring, loving, thoughtful sons, brothers, cousins, nephews, and uncles. So that's the journey. Over to you, Paul.
Great. So to put this in some context, as Christiana noted in her session that I was just at, this work is not a marathon and it's not a sprint, it's a relay race. And what we're sharing here is built on a lot of really good work that's been done before us. And we're beginning our picture and stepping into this space. What we're going to share with you are some interviews that we had with 20 Black males ages 18 to 83, where we asked them what have been 3 key experiences in their development and what lessons are they learning and what are the support systems that have been critical. We wanted to start with interviews because we wanted to capture the richness of their lived experience, and we also wanted to capture it in their language, not language imposed on them. And so that's what we're going to share with you today. Our next step is we're going to expand it. So we'll capture a national sample to identify how common are these various experiences, which ones bubble to the top, what support systems nationally seem to be most important, and we'll be able to capture some quantitative information there. And so we are at a juncture where we're thinking of moving into that quantitative stage. And so we're really interested in having you speak into where we're at right now. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Julian.
All right, so kind of going off what Dr. Yosa said, we had interviewed 20 Black males to capture some experiences they found critical in their own development. And from this section, we found that out of the 20 Black males, every single one highlighted that there were mentors within their life that provided objective support and wisdom to help facilitate that positive development. As well as mentors, there were also positive role models who were people who demonstrated their actions in a positive way to conduct themselves through life and throughout their career. All of them noted people of that stature within their life that were very impactful. Another, the distinct construct that we had found as we were doing our interviews were decision point, which refers to an impactful crossroads in one's life that were significant in the directional decisions being made for later on. So an example of this would be a Black child being given the opportunity to move schools in the middle of the school year and weighing the pros and cons with their loved ones to ensure that they're having a good school experience as well as learning from it. So those were the top 3 that we saw, top 3 themes that we saw across all the interviews. And then we also made sure to ask our interviewees what the time period that these experiences occurred. And what we saw was that 59% of these key experiences occurred between elementary school and high school, meaning that about 2/3 of these critical experiences occurred between the time period that K through 12 educators can make a very influential impact. And I think that speaks a lot into what Jeff was saying earlier about us as educators being on the front line when it comes to the development of Black males. So after key experiences, we from those key experiences, we also asked the lessons that were derived from those experiences that helped facilitate their development. And of these lessons, the top 3 were openness to change. So openness to change referring to the willingness to understand and give insight on different approaches and situations within their life and being able to adapt accordingly to them. finding the importance of relationships and how they can nurture their growth. And lastly, being the concept we titled it as being Black as an asset, not a liability. And that kind of refers to realizing their value and realizing their value and how bringing that value to the table and their perspective is very important and impactful. And a great example of this was one of the interviewees kind of talked about them being raised in a household where they were adopted. So they were raised in a household where they weren't exposed to Black culture as a whole. And a lot of their tendencies or things they learned in school were kind of looked down upon. However, after going on to college and being exposed to a lot more Black culture that they didn't have within their household, they started to really appreciate who they were and the kind of roots of who they are. The next thing we want to kind of move into are the support systems. And support systems are in reference to these kind of safety nets that are provided for Black males to help with their growth and development, and also for them to try new things and have opportunities to be exposed to different learning opportunities. The top three for those were faith and spiritual communities. So any of those communities that encourage, that had a deep commitment towards the betterment of the lives of their members, schools, which would be us, and the academic environments that exist to educate and support Black males, and finally, the family, so the interconnected body for people to nurture their children, etc. And when I think of schools specifically, I think of an example that was brought up with a student that was, as mentioned before, switching schools. And from one school, they saw that they didn't have many resources as far as like having access to books. And then they went to their new school, and the school provided one-on-one sessions with teachers. They had a book exchange program so that students were able to, if they couldn't afford new books or the school couldn't provide it, they worked within the community to bring them, and the school facilitated that. And also after school programs facilitated by the teachers to help students who are struggling within the program. So those are just ways that our interviewees highlighted that were supportive in their growth. Before moving on, I saw we have a question within the chat, and I kind of wanted to.
Yeah,
Oh.
Julian,
Mhm.
Eric is asking, can you tell us more about the group sample population demographics who are interviewed?
Of course. So as Dr. Yost had mentioned it, gave an answer briefly, but of course there were Black males. They were a sample of convenience because we were trying to draw on our own networks to kind of populate the sample. And as we move forward into the next stages of our research, we'll be doing a more randomized selection of interviewees. It's a survey. Does that answer your question, Eric?
Yes, mostly. Thank you.
Okay, gotcha. So after discussing those support systems, as I said, I wanted to make sure we leaned in to our educators that are present today. I kind of want you guys to look at these questions, take maybe a minute or two to formulate an answer so that we can kind of work together in building this knowledge transfer mechanism. So given all the support systems provided, and I can go back to the previous scheme if that helps, what are the key ones you've seen, and what might be some interesting novel delivery systems that might help with engagement? And also, have you witnessed or participated in any programs or initiatives that focus on the positive growth of Black males? So you can go ahead and put your answers, if you do have them, in the chat. And If you want a point of reference as far as support systems that were discussed previously, I can move back to the next slide. Just let me know.
I think it would be helpful if you would push back to the support system slide, Julian. Thank you.
I'd be happy to share a thought or two. So I work in a very, very predominantly white school district. And so what I often see, I'm a counselor. And so what I often see, which I think is just interesting reflecting, is that my students who are specifically Black males, we also have quite a few that are biracial. So Black and white, Black and Vietnamese, et cetera. But they lean on their families, I think, a lot more because unfortunately at school, they don't feel seen. And so I guess I always was really called to come to this because I am curious to hear other experiences and see what kind of structural systems we can put in place in a school that is 95% white to help, Black boys feel supported. And so I just noticed that they go to their families much more than they come to myself or their teachers because they aren't represented. So that's just more of a statement maybe, but I thought I would share.
No, thank you. I really appreciated that perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. One comment there is that when Black kids represent at school, that the family is kind of their connection to reality or all things supportive. I think that there is more there. What they communicate or what is heard may be the family, but there's a whole community that family is associated with. And the extent to which schools can seek to partner with the other elements of the community that Black child is living within, church groups, social communities, big brother, big sister, things of that sort. There's a myriad of tentacles, if you will, to that connection. What gets articulated or maybe what gets understood may just be family, but maybe a bit of a extension on the part of the school to look at what's contextually around that family connection could open up some additional channels.
Did anyone else want to speak to your experiences as far as programs you've been in? I see Eric also just dropped the link in as well.
I'm curious, Eric, have you been involved in that group?
I was not able to go this past year, but I have attended. It is primarily focused on the youth in that there was not a majority of adult participation. It was mostly youth-led. And so in that regard, I can't really speak to what actually happened in the sessions and so forth, but by and large, it is a positive event.
It is interesting that youth-led piece of it came out strongly as well as being a key experience that I was able to lead in some of these communities. That in itself was a powerful experience for a lot of the people we interviewed.
And I find that caveat very interesting as well, because as I'm seeing within the chat, I've seen a theme of teachers being the one to facilitate those discussions versus students, and kind of thinking about which one is more effective.
So I'm curious, with the folks who are with us today, are there additional support systems that you have either engaged or become aware of beyond those that we have captured, I'll say, or extracted from the small number of interviews that we've done? This is an amazingly chatty group today.
Representation matters in so many different ways. I hear that common theme going on, with the conversation and what you've all presented. But I know for me and my personal experience, when I saw people doing things that I believed that I could be a part of or that I could do, people forced me into leadership positions. And there's, times that I chose to be in leadership positions as well. And those all were stepping stones to get me to where I am today. In my experience with education, I know that bringing some of our Black and Brown students to universities to see what it's like, and for them to see also Black and Brown students on those campuses, and then connecting them with mentors in different professional experiences, people from Boeing, people from Microsoft, people from the hospitals, so that they all know that there are Black and Brown males and females that are doing big things all across the community, but they don't always see that in social media or in media or on TV and such. More and more of that is being highlighted, but it's not enough. I think some low-hanging fruit that we can do as educators is talk about those in our classrooms, right? I mean, I think about even just the fact that it wasn't 5 or 6 years ago that I learned about, the women that were part of the movie and experience of Hidden Figures, right? I mean, like, I'm just so angry that my educators when I was younger didn't even talk about Katherine Johnson, and such. Like, how did we miss that? Women that helped us get into space, right? I mean, those type of things I think should be natural and commonplace in our classroom settings, not these one-off or only during Black History Month, or, it should be frequent, consistent, intentional conversations that are being had so that Black and Brown males can see that there are plenty of opportunities out there that have been achieved by many Black and Brown males before them.
That's very well put, Daniel. And I can recall as a youngster, and I didn't recognize this when it was happening, but I would learn about somebody, but I would quickly dismiss the possibility that I could ever do that. It's like, it's in the book, but I could never do that. And that's just not necessarily the case. The challenge is that there's somebody doing it who looks like you. And this is about getting, not only having the desire or the interest, but providing the access to, so that it breaks down some of the barriers that that came up for me, and probably has come up for a lot of kids. Well, I saw it on TV, but I can never do it.
Yeah, and then it's the irony of it is that it is like seeing a musician, an artist, an athlete. We see that so much in the Black community, and those are very highly looked at role models, but yet those opportunities are very slim. Those are harder to do than to become a teacher or to become a lawyer or to become, a technician, or engineer and such, because we don't ever see that. We don't ever see those accomplishments or those great things that are happening in our immediate community. The other day, my son saw Black firemen on TV, and it was like on the American Idol or some show we were watching, and he's like, Black men are firemen? I'm like, yes, they are, right? Like, and it just saddens me because we don't see it. We just don't see it, and it's there. There are many that are doing it, but our Black and Brown males do not see it enough.
Can I just add, I'll turn my camera Just as Dan is talking about representation, to me, as I look at these support systems, the underlying theme, the common theme is relationships, right? That these things aren't successful without relationships and building trust with one another. And I actually was quite surprised to see fraternities because it seems like at 20%, because it seems like that's why men join fraternities, that's why women join sororities, is for that bonding and camaraderie and maybe even networking. And so I was actually kind of shocked to see that fraternities only received 20%, or people thought 20%, 20% of the people thought that had a meaningful impact on their lives. But, again, as I stated, it seems to me the success comes not only in representation, but the relationships, the genuine relationships, the trusting relationships that are being built. And that starts at a very early age, that, we see Black males in a positive light, and we are building and establishing those relationships in preschool. And in preschool, changing those narratives for them, because ultimately how we as educators view and see the children that fill the seats of our classroom, that influences how their peers see them as well. And that can be just as damaging as, us in our implicit bias, but that we then impart that implicit bias on the class and their peers.
Thank you, Zanasha. I was listening Daniel and Zanasha, you, and looking at this kind of data on the presentation here. It occurred to me that definitely the representation is important, and many Black and Brown students are influenced by whom we are presenting, right? In the classroom and outside of the classroom, in our conversation, in our education system, and also media. And at the same time, I'm thinking right now, our school system or higher education is not representative of BIPOC students or even the demographics of the United States yet. It's just so white, and or even the K through 12 system, many female teachers as well. So then I'm thinking, okay, then what should we do? And I identify myself as an Asian. Then as an Asian, if I want to build a relationship with the Black and Brown folks or kids, what have I done? What have I done to provide these faith spiritual communities that could impact Black and Brown students 45% as their support system? Or what have I done to support those families who would impact our students, their future, like 75% as a support system? Or what have I done for our Black and Brown students to build their career or have some good model examples in the social communities that would impact 90% in their social system? So it occurred to me, I'm thinking about what I have done, and I think that I need to really inform myself with those, like, until the Hidden Figures movie, I have not known those like great scientists before, and I have not looked for intentionally the Black and Brown folks who could be a great representative for our kids. I have not done that before. I will just find some articles that is more convenient to me or more available to me. And it occurred to me that I think that as an educator and then also school counselor in the K through 12 system, I kind of took this time kind of as a reflection that I need to do more.
I do want to say to the before we move forward to the fraternities and sorority piece about the effectiveness. When we were doing these surveys, we were having them kind of opt into what experiences they found impactful to them. So maybe less of the ineffectiveness of fraternities and more so they didn't get that opportunity or they weren't exposed to that. Or even if they did have that fraternity experience, it just wasn't the most impactful. So being cognizant that we are in the beginning stages, when we do go through our survey, that statistic for fraternities may change. Okay, I'm gonna go. I also really appreciate all the feedback. I'm gonna go ahead into the next thing we measured and kept live. Oh, I think we have another comment, but I think they connect, so I'll make sure to hit that comment within the next slide. So the next thing we kind of measured for were the strategies for support within those communities. So what were some of the things that made Black males feel more comfortable, helped in their development, that were provided from these communities? So one of those things that were the most impactful that all interviewees felt accurately represented the experience, where there was someone that had confidence in their ability. So there were people in organizations that believed in them and also encouraged them to do more. And I think someone spoke on that piece earlier during our discussion. Another factor was transparency. So there were people within their life that kind of expressed an unfiltered truth, and their main goal was to help them in their development and gain experiences, and that their feedback was constructive in that. Lastly, the high expectations component, as far as like holding them to a certain standard. And the first example that came to my mind was one of our interviewees had mentioned their mentors, that something they weren't used to was their mentors always like being on them as far as like, what have you done so far? Do you think you can do better? How can you apply yourself even more? And there's a concept that a lot of people within my generation like to talk about like matching the energy that is put towards you. And in that, when he was discussing it previously, people did not expect much from him, because whether that's because of his skin, maybe whether it's because of his socioeconomic background, they did not expect much from him. So he did less, even, and did the bare minimum to pass. Versus when he made that switch, suddenly there were higher expectations placed on him, and he matched that quota. So that's one of the examples that kind of came into my head. And these were the myriad of strategies that came up within our interviews. So kind of speaking to that piece, we wanted to know what are some ways to expose this demographic to knowledge outside of the classroom. One, what would and wouldn't connect, and what are the entry points? So when would be the best times to implement this, and what would heighten their receptivity to these interventions? So the first thing, I think we can just start with question one and your comments on that. And I can also go back to the previous slide to help with that.
Julian, I can see there was one comment in the chat on this topic, just to kind of kick it off. Partnering with communities, so there is not the separation of school life and home life, which tends to make school seem irrelevant and connected or disconnected to real life. And the community is a broad set of constituents, but they are the fiber that encases these young people. And my sense is there was a relatively common desire to support youth, in general, but oftentimes the connectivity, the relationships between the various entities that can bring that extra value or enable young people to see beyond kind of what's right in front of them. Those connections haven't been made, and partnering is a strong word. but it's a very meaningful one. And I think this comment that was made earlier in the chat speaks to one of the key strategies that could be helpful in this arena.
I also went ahead and put the questions in the chat to kind of help with the discussion.
Okay.
So back to Libby's original comment, she had mentioned that I teach kindergarten in Redmond and have not experienced programs beyond what has been mentioned thus far. I'd love to see more mentorship opportunities in the area between Black men and our young Black male students. The need is great. I'm specifically thinking of a student I have currently who is so ingenuitive. I'd love to be able to connect him to a role model at such a young age. Oh, so speaking to that knowledge transfer piece, that's what we're really trying to create. And also, on top of having that representation within the classroom, making sure that it's hitting home, not just in school, but making sure they can implement those growth strategies throughout their career. So we want it to be very impactful, and that's why we want to introduce those strategies on top of just representation.
And there's somewhat of an underlying hypothesis here that accomplished Black men are willing to share how they got there with younger people. Oftentimes they don't have the time or the energy or the drive to identify, well, who would want to know that? So the example that Daniel gave earlier about his son having seen a fireman on television, you can see the result. But if the fireman or if a fireman is accessible to his son and talks about the experience of being a fireman, the kinds of things that interest him when he was younger, being fit, and all the kinds of things that sort of are the wiring, if you will, to get to this thing that you're interested in. That's the kind of insight that we believe is available if only the opportunity to provide it is known. And so this is, as much as it is about knowledge transfer, it's bringing the needing party and the having party, if you will, in terms of insight and experience together, so that young Black men or young Black males don't have to guess at what a path might be. They can actually hear from someone who's navigated that path, and they can make decisions about whether that path is of greater interest to them or less interest to them based upon what is involved in getting there. I mean, the examples we see in our community about, athletes or actors, they're accomplished at that point. I want to be the next LeBron James. Have any idea what was involved in him getting to be who he is? No, but I know he shoots well. Well, so giving insight into the journey is, we think, very, very informative and can be of help to these young boys as they're developing their path.
I do want to point out, just thinking about even my own experience, because I know that we, even in our conference today, we have white brothers and sisters that are, in the educational system, and that sometimes are white, or even colleagues of different ethnic groups that are in spaces with Black males. Sometimes they are apprehensive or tentative in building relationships with a Black boy because they don't think that they will connect with them. They don't think that they can relate to them and everything. And so they're standoffish, and they're like, I got to find a Black professional to help support them and, and such. I think growing up, I had white male, white female teachers that were amazing. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm a teacher myself, but they also were intentional about not only being a mentor to me, you know, as a white educator, but also finding those professionals of color for me. Some of them were their own friends and colleagues as well, and they would put them in front of me. So I would see other professionals, other BIPOC professionals that are like, wait, what? They coach too? They do, you know, and so like that allowed me to have those various experiences. So I went to SPU. I'm looking at Julian and I'm just like really, I'm always just inspired when I see students of color at SPU, because when I went there in the late 90s, I was one of 12 Black students, right? And I was one of those token Black guys that was put on the brochures, the pamphlets and everything and such to build more diversity. Whenever I go back to SPU, I'm so encouraged that there's so many more students of color there, so many more professors and administrators and colleagues of color that are there. But that only happened because of the mentorship and all the things that Jeff, Paul, and Julian are talking about, where those relationships are being built because of people are being intentional of putting Black males in spaces where they're seeing people do excel, and they're seeing Black males being held to a high standard and presented with opportunity where you are capable, you are talented, you are gifted enough, and you're going to be able to do this because I'm going to be there alongside you. I'm going to encourage you. And I had people in my life that did that. And many of them were white educators that were just there for me and didn't have the deficit mindset that many others had of me. And so I was always encouraged because this white educator really believed in me as a Black male. You know, my early high school experience was in California, LA, Rodney King riots. And so there was a lot of, you know, traumatic racial experiences I went through, but I did have white educators that, you know, really were looking to be in solidarity with me and my other students of color friends that really wanted to make it, but we didn't know how to get there. But they really took the time and the effort to, you know, stand in the gaps and be there for us when there was other people that didn't really want to help us or didn't even believe that we could do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I can certainly resonate with your comment, Daniel. I have a good friend here in Florida who's actually from Rochester, New York, just moved down here, but he's retired, and he is a Caucasian former business owner who is the big brother to an African-American young man in Rochester. And his comments to me about this work is, I'm so glad that someone is doing this because there are parts of my upbringing that I know don't relate to, he calls them my little. And being able to get access to experiences that have proven to produced positive accomplishments in the community that he's from, I'm not going to step out of the way and not be his big brother anymore, but I'm happy to be able to get access to those kinds of experiences, to maybe get access to people who've had them, to connect by little with those folks. So this is not by any stretch of the imagination attempting to be exclusionary. It is more about Black boys tend to resonate with people who look like them, who have done things of the sort that they might be interested in. Somebody asked a question in the chat about the transparency strategy and the 90%. I know for the folks that I interviewed, transparency really came down to, I engaged with mentors or people in my community that were not afraid to tell me that I had feelings too. I wanted to drop out of school. So they were open, and that openness what resonated with the young boy that was receiving the input. So my point here is that it is not exclusionary, but the experiences that have been had when you can look at someone who looks like you, that doubt that I had when I was a kid thinking, well, yeah, I see that, but I can never do that. That goes away, because now I'm actually witnessing someone who has actually done something of the sort that I'm interested in, and they weren't hampered by the fact that their skin color was the same as mine.
Yes, and for the individuals that I interviewed, as far as the transparency piece goes, following the being intentional with the conversation that they were having. They also were very realistic about the bounds and the realities that Black males face and the work they'll have to do to be successful or find resources and offer those resources. So it was about having that having candid conversations that would help strengthen the relationship and further the development.
That's a good point, Joel. One other thing I'll add on the transparency piece, it went the other way as well. I can recall 3 or 4 conversations where the interviewee was telling me the people I was engaging with would not accept the excuses that might get accepted by my teachers. It's like, boy, I've been through that, so don't try to run that game on me, that kind of thing. And so that was a two-way sort of transparency. So, they can look through me, so I better not try to, put up a facade with them, because they'll see right through it.
I have been reading in the chat and just wanted to add a few comments related to those things that people are leaving there. I work in a small school district as a social emotional learning specialist. And the focus of my work in the past couple of years especially has been kind of finding the spaces of integration between the race and equity work and the social emotional learning work. We've had these ideas, kind of like separated in K-12 for a long time, and really understanding the engagement of these ideas. And one of the things I'm also been thinking about a lot is this idea of the barriers of family engagement in the school system, and how can we bring what we're discovering, what we're learning about ourselves as a system, as educators, as partners with kids and families. How can we bring that to the spaces where families are already engaging, which I think you guys have really referenced really nicely. And I think one of the things that causes educators a barrier is exactly what Daniel was kind of referencing earlier, is this sense of, do I have the experiences that I need to have in order to enter the spaces and have the families identify with me or welcome me in? And I think the key to that is really going in with authenticity and vulnerability, and not thinking that I'm coming to you with all these answers and all these services and all these things that you need, but really, what is the reciprocity that we offer each other in these relationships? And when we talk about partnership, we can't go into that with this sort of hierarchical sense that, I'm coming from the school, and so I have all these things to tell you and give you. What is it that we share with each other, and that we, if we can do that out of vulnerability and authenticity, I think we have a lot better chance.
Mary, I agree with you. As I was listening to you, I hearkened back to my long since passed away mother, who was a 40-year teacher. And she would always say to me, just focus on the child. Just focus on the child. And I was like, well, Mom, what do you mean? And her point was that parents focus on their children. And if they see in someone who is bringing tools to the table an authentic interest in that child, they look past the face, they look past the gender, oh, you're in the same space that I'm in. And so what we're hoping to do is to help to equip those of you who will be engaging in those spaces with tools and assets that can be brought to bear to benefit the child. So now the messenger is not coming as if I have all the answers. I'm from the school, and let me tell you how to manage your child. It's more about your child has demonstrated a certain amount of interest in this area or that area, or here's some things that might be of interest. And so again, it's about putting things in your toolbox that will help that focus on the child be not only authentic, but genuinely appreciated by that parent who's got the exact same mission.
So just to kind of bring out the themes of what I'm hearing, the thing so far, things that would heighten the receptivity of these strategies would be being authentic and transparency. Were there any other, listening to understand, okay. Were there any other particular, I guess I want to focus more on like entry points where these interventions would be best utilized? Or do you guys have any experience in regard to that to make sure we cover all? Makes sense.
Can you repeat that?
So one point within our questions is kind of as far as these strategies go in assisting the development of Black youth, when would be the best time to do so? And that's what we're referring to as entry points. So implementing these strategies, and we can, after this question, we can move on because we're at a 5-minute mark.
I always like to think about being proactive. That helps as opposed to being reactive, right? So not all of a sudden so-and-so has done this and now guess what? You get to be in a program. But being on the proactive end of, again, I go back to starting with preschool, you know, and building those relationships and those skills and do that narrative writing at preschool. I think preschool and kindergarten are great entry points. They're natural entry points, as well as, you know, when you get to 6th grade and when you get to high school, those are just kind of natural entry points, just because of the way school systems are set up. But being proactive helps.
That's it.
I think entry points is also really understanding what the family's needs are, or even the interests. You know, I keep thinking about you know, there's a movie called Glory Road, and the basketball coach challenges the kid because he's not getting good grades in geology, which is, I think it's geology, the study of rocks or something like that. And the kid's like, I don't do rocks. Brothers don't do rocks, right? And I can relate to that because there's so many different classes that we're, or curriculum or units that we're forced to learn, but we just aren't interested in them, right? And so like really asking the families and the students, like what, you know, asking the Black boys, like what are some things you're interested in? And maybe even trying to see how you can integrate math and art and all those types of things with that. You know, I know I'm talking more, you know, this sounds more culturally responsive teaching and such, but at the same time, like, are we really asking the community and asking them what are some programs or systems that we can establish that really gets the kids interested? You know, field trips, you know, events, different things that are very, very not only relevant but relational, and really gets kids excited about education, excited about learning, and excited about building connections in the school community. I think those are key entry points, because I think a lot of times we don't ask our students and we don't ask our families what will benefit them or what will really allow them to embrace education to the fullest. We just do what we do, and we just have these standards and we just go and we go and go. We think that this is what they need, but many times it may be what they need, but can we do something more creatively to meet those needs as well?
Yep. Agreed.
Agreed, definitely. Thank you. Just for the sake of time, were there any other questions? And also, actually, I'm gonna kind of pass the baton over to Dr. Yost.
So we are very short in time. I would say as we move forward, any other thoughts you have in terms of big takeaways for us as we continue this work. And then also your educators if all of us lock in at least one thing from this session going forward, that has at least a shot at making a difference going forward. I thank everyone so much for their input so far.
Yes, thank you so much. And as far as those takeaways, if you have any other suggestions, reflection pieces, you can email me here. I can also put that in the chat for convenience. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys and ladies.
Jorge,